Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site. Dr. Mark Echo, Harold H.B. Bell doing the thing. What's happening, man?
Oh, it's a great day. It's so sunny and beautiful here. Can you believe the temperature in November in Indianapolis?
I'm loving it.
Wow.
And great show today. We're going to be talking to 10 Point Coalition, who has done a wonderful job in our community we serve. And the topic of the show is transformational presence.
Yeah.
Tell us what that means, Mark.
Oh, man, we're going to get into that definition, but here's the bottom line. Let's just say what you and I always say. It's all community all the time, and if we're not interested in being there and doing that with the people that we know sitting right next to us, then I don't know what else we should be doing.
Hey, well, we're going to do what we do. We're going to play a couple of songs here, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about presence, transformational present, as it is relative in our Proverbs, in our book of Proverbs, like we do each and every week. Warp and Woof Radio. Tell somebody to tell somebody on the Cool Groove site at RadioNext.tv. We'll be right back. RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. Man, if that doesn't make you feel a little better. Dr. Mark's over here all sweaty and stuff. Come get him, Virginia. Come get him. You were here at Warp and Woof Radio. Comenius Institute is the great sponsor of this show, where we try to weave knowledge and wisdom together specifically for those young people leaving home for the first time, as we say each and every week, being thrown out to the wolves, pretty much, because the world is a forest full of them out here. So, Dr. Mark, please, before we get started today, just tell a little bit about Comenius Institute and what we're trying to do in this great community of ours.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a ministry with folks down at IUPUI with students, faculty who are interested in maintaining and communicating a Christian view of life and things. So we meet with folks every week. We're interested to see how the academic intellectual life is connected to the Christian worldview. And we understand this through an understanding of Jesus being Lord of all things. Colossians 1:17, by him all things consist or are held together. And so that's what we do. Warp and Woof, of course, the vertical, horizontal threads that hold fabric together. And that's what it is when we talk about a Christian view of all things.
And, that really kind of dilutes the fear and all the questioning that people who are not endowed in their strength of faith, to let them understand, okay, here's where we begin.
Right.
And before we get going today, we want to remind you at the top of the hour, 11 o'clock, 10 Point Coalition will be in the studio today. Reverend Charles Ellis, Reverend Charles Harrison.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Going to be a great time, and we're going to talk about transformational presence from their standpoint. But that's a good place for us to start and define the purpose or the phrase and why is it so important, transformational presence, Mark.
Well, I got to be honest with you and say what I'm about to say isn't real sexy. So I don't think I've ever said that before. But there it is.
Well, I have.
There it is. What I mean by that is when we talk about things like this, we're not talking about everything's going to change tomorrow. Everything's going to change next week. Everything's going to change next year. We're talking about the long view. And unfortunately, the long view depends on how folks are being taught. So when I think about this, I think about political processes could be faster, but not necessarily better. You're supposed to be building bridges and not walls with people. We need to be shutting up and listening to other folks. So let me just define these terms real quick, but we're talking about the long-term impact of this. First of all, we talk about transformation, and this actually is a statement right out of Ephesians chapter 5. We'll get to Proverbs in just a minute. But in Ephesians 5, it says, "Walk as children of light, for the fruit of light is found in all that is good, right, and true. And try to discern what's pleasing to the Lord. Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them." So we have a 2-point responsibility. We're to be the children of light. That is, we're to talk about the good, the true, and the right. We're supposed to live that way. And of course, all of this is then pleasing to the Lord because of his righteous character. But then the other aspect of this is we're supposed to expose the unfruitful works of darkness. So we're supposed to expose abuse. We're supposed to expose injustice. We're supposed to expose anything that goes contrary to the scriptures, and we're supposed to encourage those people who are poor, maligned, marginalized, neglected, and so on. So transformation is two ideas. We are to bring light to the world, and we are to expose the unfruitful works of darkness. But presence, this is real simple. You and I talk about this all the time. Presence is just being there. So when I think about presence, I think about Mike Roll, who's been here on the show, Q Commons, He's a guy who wants to make sure that everybody in India is connected. I think about Jay Hine down at the Sagamore Institute doing great work in terms of research about how do we think differently about life and things. And then, of course, Amy Sherman and her great book, Kingdom Calling. That particular book, I think, has tremendous impact for us when we think about what does it mean to actually think about how do we impact our community. There it is, transformational and presence. Be there. Be the light and expose unfruitful works of darkness.
Now, you know, we always love to go to Proverbs because it is the book of wisdom and knowledge, and it pretty much is the roadmap to just a proper way of living on this earth. What does Proverbs say about transformational presence?
Man, when I started doing this study again, you know, everybody thinks about the word neighbor in terms of Jesus' famous line. And I think we've talked about this in the past, but I'll say it again. The famous line of Jesus is, love your neighbor as yourself. And that's a really important, powerful line. It actually comes out of Leviticus 19, of all places. And so in the First Testament, God was saying to his people, hey, the folks living next to you, take care of them, okay? If they're poor, help them with the financial end of things. If they are sick or unhealthy, help them with that aspect of health care. All of those kinds of things. Now here's what Proverbs says. Proverbs 11:12 says, whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense. Oh, I love that. Lacks sense. But a man of understanding remains silent. So you know what? If you see your neighbor doing something dumb, doing something foolish, shut up. There's no need to put that out there. There's no need to talk about those things. Don't belittle your neighbor. 12:26 says, one who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. So, you know, your neighbor comes over, wants to talk about something. You, as a Christian, bear the responsibility of moving them in a certain direction, once again, going back to that emphasis on being the light. 14:21 says, whoever despises his neighbor is a sinner, but blessed is he who is generous to the poor. We come back to the issue of poverty again. 1 out of every 6 verses in the Bible has to do with material goods. We bear responsibility for the poor. And then 25:17 to 18, these lines make me chuckle just leading into them. Let your foot be seldom in your neighbor's house, lest he have his fill of you and hate you. In other words, don't go visit your neighbor all the time.
Yeah.
And then the second line is, a man who bears false witness against his neighbor is like a war club, a sword, or a sharp arrow. So be truthful, be honest, be right. Bring light to people. That's what we're to be about.
You know, and it's ironic as we sit here, this one rule, one seed would cure pretty much about 80-90% of the ills of our community. Just this one topic right here.
There it is.
Would eliminate so much of the problems that we're having as a new global world that we live in.
Yeah, exactly.
So last week we were discussing the importance of place, and place is the culture and the environment of which we reside. So how is transformational presence important to place?
So I got a quote and a real old guy here. His name is Cicero, and he was a Roman philosopher. And this is what he said on friendship. He said, nature has so formed us that a certain tie unites us all. But this tie becomes stronger from proximity, from place, from being close to each other. So I'm going to read that again. Nature has so formed us that a certain tie unites us all. But this tie becomes stronger from proximity. So, what are we supposed to do? We get all upset about things that are happening that we can't do a thing about. So what are we going to do with our energy that we're all concerned about? Be concerned about the people that live next door to you. Be concerned about the folks who live down the street. Be concerned about your neighborhood. Be concerned about homes. Help people to come into a community to help them set themselves up in a way that is beneficial to them. We are, in this country, losing our proximity because we are not talking with people. We are not going to talk with other people that don't look like us, that don't live like us, that don't think like us. And if we're not willing to cross the street to go talk to somebody else, we're losing our proximity, we're losing our closeness. So transformational presence, bringing light into a place, is of course going to take place when we actually cross the street and go and interact with folks. If there's a tragedy, go meet with that tragedy. We can't do this via virtual communities. As much as we're doing what we're doing right now over the airwaves in an internet setting, that's great. We're promoting the very thing, and that is to be with each other. HB and I are sitting here together. We're brothers. We talk about this all the time. We are living and working toward the same goals. He and I have the same idea, and that is our job is to communicate all the good things that everybody's doing in their community all around town.
And before we go to this break and move on, the most compelling thing about all of this is we're able now to view and give opinions and witness other cultures without knowing, feeling, touching, letting
That's
our
right.
senses be involved. And that's kind of a dangerous thing.
It's definitely dangerous. We have to actually participate with other people. So the other day, for instance, here's just something that crosses my mind. I was reading in the paper, 90 languages in the city of Indianapolis.
Yeah.
90 languages in Indianapolis are being spoken here. So if you want to talk to people that aren't like you, this is the place to be,
It's the place
man.
to be. Well, we're going to come right back. Transformational presence is what we're talking about today on Warp and Woof Radio. Please, I think this is one of the most interesting topics that we can discuss, especially during this time of transformation. We're going to make this thing happen. You are listening to Warp and Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site at radionext.tv. RadioNext.tv, transformational presence here today is the topic on Warp and Woof Radio. Dr. Mark Eckel, Harold H.B. Bell, and each and every Wednesday morning you can check us out 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Comenius Institute is a great sponsor of this show, helping to make the transformation, and speaking of transformational, of young people leaving home for the first time without any knowledge or sense of what awaits them out in this world, but the book of Proverbs. And I advise you, if you're not versed in your Bible, that is a great place to start, even for your young ones.
That's right.
Please, just check out The Way to Live. That's basically what it's saying. If you do these things, life won't have as many complications as if you do not.
That's right.
So we're talking about transformational presence today. And the second segment of this show, Dr. Mark, it's a Christian's job to transform culture. We talk about it all the time. What are you going to do in the place you live? How does transformation work?
Yeah. There's a statue of Jesus that stands outside Christ the King Church in San Diego, California. The almost life-size figure is like others that one might see in a cemetery or somebody's lawn or near a church building, with one exception. The statue has no hands. It seems that vandals cut him off. So the pastor decided to leave the statue as it was, and a sign was erected next to the Christ sculpture, later replaced by a permanent plaque intended for Christians, and it says this: "I have no hands but yours. I have no hands but yours," speaking to all Christians. So all offers to repair the statue have been turned down, and this statue still exists outside Christ the King Church in San Diego. Look, when I think about this, I think about one of the great church ladies, Teresa of Avila, who said, "Christ has no body but yours, and no hands and no feet on earth but yours." Ultimately, the issue is people see what we do. Our responsibility is to be consistent, to be dependable, to be somebody that other folks can count on. So when I think about being a Christian and being transformational, is it up to me? Well, honestly, it's up to the work of the Holy Spirit through me, but the transformation of a culture depends on me, which brings us to the great tagline of this show, which is do good, do good, do good, out of Titus chapter 3. There you go.
Unbelievable. And that's well said. This next question is no, I mean, really, because, it'd be so nice if we were at all of us good Christian people. And, here's what's funny about us good Christian people. In our heart, we all think we feel good about what we do in our walk. But truth is, do all Christians agree on how to make a difference in this culture? And I guess the bigger questions will be why and why not?
Well, no. Next question.
No, it is hilarious when I watch. I watch a group of us get together, people who in their heart, they've accepted Christ as the Savior.
Yep.
They confess with their mouth that in their heart they believe, man, and get a room of 100 of them together, man, and it is absolutely civil war in the Christian world. And I'm like,
it's a sad thing.
It is a sad thing.
Yeah,
so address this.
So to be funny, the answer is no. Do all Christians agree? Obviously, no. But we can have the same basic beliefs, but not the same approaches or methods of communication. So, you and I might agree, let's say, for instance, on the Apostles' Creed. And we might be able to say it together and hold hands on that and say, yes, I agree with all of his statements here. But when it comes to how do I approach the issues, let's say, for instance, if I see an issue of injustice, I may approach the issue in a different way than you all do, and that's fine. It's just that we have to recognize it's different methods of communication and strategies. So I'm concerned, really, for what I see in Christian contexts around me as what I'm referring to now as cultural Christianity. I'll be writing on this soon, cultural Christianity, where folks focus on an ethnic, political, cultural, justice, whatever issue. And they become whatever that issue is, and they do not begin the hard work of asking, what does Scripture say about it before I proceed? So they become the very issue. Now, there's nothing wrong with focusing on speaking in the darkness, because I just mentioned that from Ephesians chapter 5. But when you become the issue, you miss everything else that's all around us in life. So I've got a fast five for us. Remember, I bring fives every once in a while. So here we go. Number 1, we need to speak out. Number 2, reach out. Number 3, leave out. Number 4, keep out. And number 5, day in, day out. Let me explain what I mean.
Yeah, you got jazzy with that,
I'm telling you, man.
You've been taking around a brother a little bit
That'll
too much,
preach.
Man.
That'll preach. Speak out. If you see something, say something. That's a great line, actually, in airports today. If you see something, say something. We're concerned about things, speak out. Number 2, reach out. Talk with your neighbor. Be involved in a community organization. Reach out to other people. Number 3, leave out. Don't divide, unite. Talk about unity, not diversity. Discuss, care, show grace, be generous. Number 4, keep out. Don't get personal. Stay away from issues that are personal. Don't tell people what to do. Mind your own business. Keep out of theirs. And number 5, day in, day out. Be consistent, be dependable. See, people are going to look at us and they're going to say, wow, I saw that Monday, I saw that Tuesday, I saw that Wednesday. You know where I'm going to go? All the way to Sunday and back again. So people look at you, they look at me, and they say, hey, they're the same all the time. That's pretty cool. I think I can live with that.
I tell people all the time, faith is our Heavenly Father, where the results of you believe because of the results of.
That's
Truth is like a checking account. And you got to keep investing in it so people will know that your value is real. Because if you're inconsistent, check my bounce.
Man, I'm telling you, we got to bring a pulpit up.
You already know. Well, in this second segment, last question, give us some contemporary examples of a transformational presence and where it is in the modern day Christian world.
Man, I got 2 words for us today. Reader's Digest.
Oh, no.
Reader's Digest. So this particular issue, November issue of Reader's Digest, this year, has a title on the front cover that says 21 True Life Stories of Kindness and Generosity. And I want to read a couple of these because, man, if these don't, make you tear up, I don't know what's wrong with your tear ducts. But here it is. There was a jailbreak in Parker County, Texas in June. A correctional officer is alive because of it. Inmates were awaiting court appearances in a holding cell when the officer watching them collapsed. The inmates called out for help. When none appeared, they used their collective weight to break down the cell door.
Okay.
Rather than making a run for it, they went to the officer's aid, still yelling for help. One even tried the officer's radio. Eventually, guards heard the commotion. They came in. After placing the inmates back in their cell, CPR was performed. It never crossed my mind not to help that individual, whether he's got a gun or a badge, says the inmate. If he falls down, I'm going to help. Rebecca Garvison could feel the passenger's eyes rolling as she walked toward her seat, carrying her newborn. They were flying from Kalamazoo to Rucker, Alabama, where Rebecca's husband was stationed. Minutes into the flight, Riley wailed. Her little girl wailed. A nearby couple glared, so Rebecca moved. Riley was still crying when her seatmate, Ms. Miller, asked if she could try holding her. Riley quickly fell asleep in Miller's arms and stayed that way throughout the flight. Ms. Miller, you'll never understand how happy this act of kindness has made my family. You've just been, you could have been irritated like everybody else, but you held my little girl the entire flight and let me get some rest and peace of mind. And here's one more. Prayer broke out all over this summer in Walmart aisles, gas stations, and roadsides. In a Columbus, Georgia Walmart, an African-American man walked up to a Euro-American police officer, and within seconds the two were holding hands with heads bowed in prayer. In Kentucky, a homeless man, a cop, were photographed in a similar position. They stood this way for about 30 seconds. A woman who posted the photograph said. In Mississippi, Deputy Sheriff Josh Harmon posted on Facebook, had one of the most amazing experiences of my life. An elderly black woman comes up to me and says, your life matters, can I pray with you? And we prayed, and people joined in, and they were black and they were white together. There was no hate, there was just praying. Reader's Digest, pages 95 to 96 in your November issue. Go check these out, man.
Whew. Sounds like heaven on earth, brother. We'll be right back. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio, Comenius Institute on RadioNext.tv and the Cool Groove site. RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. Warp and Woof Radio. Dr. Mark Echo, Harold H.B. Bell in here. And really, really interesting topic here, man. Did you pick this after?
I did.
You already knew this was coming up after the election and all that stuff.
Honestly, I didn't put that together with the election at all, honestly. But 10 Point and I just decided that we were going to have each other in each of the shows, which is really cool. And it just happened to be this day, so there it is.
And we want to remind you that 10 Point Coalition will be on the show right at the top of the hour. It should be a very interesting time. And then Dr. Mark Eckel will be a guest on the Community Voice Show, which 10 Point Coalition hosts each and every Wednesday between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Hopefully all we can do and what we can do is bring you information, healthy, empowering, educational information through this platform is the design here. It's so funny, we were talking off air, and I'm like, man, look, we have so many veins and avenues that need blood running through it.
That's right.
There's enough room for everyone to have a voice, have a platform, and then maybe come together because information is exposed. And this transformational presence is necessary right now as we get ready to make a transformation with our political system here right now. Connect the Christian community, and how do we get them engaged with transformational presence, Mark? How do Christians participate in the culture without being part of the culture? And that's a hard thing to do.
It's very hard. You and I talk about walking this line. We walk this razor's edge because that's really what it is. But I'm going to give it to you from Jesus' point of view. Jesus said, you're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. So what does that mean? I think that's one of the most confusing statements for some folks to get a handle on. Bottom line is we live in this world. We can't get out of it. We're not supposed to get out of it. We're supposed to be here in the world. So we go all the way back to what I said early in the show about Ephesians 5. We're supposed to be light. So the light, that literally, we're supposed to be living a life that attracts other people to us because they see Jesus in us. We're not of the world. That is, we don't live like people in the world. We don't live with the same viewpoints. We don't maybe have the same perspectives. We certainly don't have the same worldview as some do in the world in which we live. But that's not our job. Our job is simply to be who Jesus says we're supposed to be. So let me give you some examples of this. I was mentioning to you off air as we were talking about this question. And I said, I've done a 14-week series on this, so I'm going to try and keep it in 90 seconds here. But
well, good luck on that convention.
I know. There's so much to say about it. So here's a few ideas. And these are real practical suggestions about how do we participate without becoming a part of. So here are some ideas. We should keep our expectations for change in check because slow change is good change. Our concern for cultural reversals, immediacy, this is an unwise approach. Another idea is that Christians should beware of giving pat answers. We should be looking for workable solutions. So pat answers, by the way, can come from liberals, conservatives, Democrats, from Republicans, doesn't matter who you are, but we need to look for ways in which folks can work together. Christians must be really careful about our statements because we ought to be careful about truth. That's what we're really concerned about. And going right along with that, we need to be careful of making overstatements. Saying nasty, awful things about somebody isn't going to be attractive at all. That famous line, that famous old proverb, that you attract more flies with honey than you do with vinegar is still true. So that's something we ought to actually participate in that way. Christians must promote the good while identifying the bad. Gee, does that sound vaguely like anything we talk about all the time? And then Christians should not place the blame on any one area or person of culture. Individuals make up a culture as much as the culture influences individuals. So we need to interact with the culture that we serve. That's our responsibility, just not doing the things that the culture does.
Interesting. Good friend of mine from Christ Missionary Baptist Church, Pastor John Gurton, went live on his Facebook feed the other day.
Okay.
They had been sending out letters ready to fine senior citizens for small things like cracks in the concrete. And when he made the video, he went out on Facebook Live, and he was so adamant about it that I felt the passion. I said, okay, here's a solution. We got to get a solution for these seniors. But I guess this leads right to what you're talking about. What can you do in your place of presence instead of trying to save the world?
Cracks in the sidewalk, man.
And it was so sad because they're actually putting dollar amounts on what these people need to do to improve their home, and it's in an area where they're trying to take these homes over. Mm-hmm. So he's got a call of action now, but it was just amazing as we come to this next question about how should local churches become a presence in their locations. Seeing their neighborhoods being transformed.
Sure.
And that was one way, I guess, leading into that question, that's one of the examples. How can you make a voice or make something happen where you are?
Right.
Explain that.
Well, I'm going to probably step on some toes here, but here we go. I'm not a real big fan of these satellite churches where, the preacher's in one place and he's spreading this video feed out into 3 or 4 or 5 different churches. And I'm not a fan of that because there's no incarnational presence. So if we're going to talk about transformational presence, you got to be with people. You're not with people in a video feed. So on a Sunday morning, especially, if we're coming together as a church, man, this is our opportunity to be and touch and live with and love on folk. And this is a really important issue for us. So where I live, for instance, this community where I live is really focused on athletics, on sports. So our church actually has a sports ministry. And that's kind of cool because that's what the community's into. So whatever your community's into, you need to be into. This last Saturday, Ebenezer Baptist.
Yes.
Remember, I was promoting that. I came here, promoted it, went down there, took some pictures. You can see it on the Facebook feed. But bottom line is, you got a pastor like Pastor Shelby. You've got a great leader, Janelle Williams, down there. And they're putting together this really cool event where they're saying, hey, this place that we live in, this Riverside place, this is a huge issue for us. Wendy Cooper was on our show last week. She talked about this. The emphasis of, hey, how do we actually participate as a local church? Let's talk about our history. And so, man, I was up there with some of these older ladies, and getting my picture taken with them. And they were dressing.
Oh, the sisters with the hats.
Oh, my word. I'll tell you, it was so cool. But they were telling me of their stories, and all this stuff. And that's where this thing happens, is right there. So we're going from cracks in the sidewalk to Riverside Speaks, and you're going to do something with folks in your community. You need to see the need, be with the people, encourage and uplift. Can I say this even any louder? Practice humility. Practice humility. Be giving, gracious, and generous. This is our responsibility. Quit complaining. Quit griping. Get out there and do something.
There you go. And Scripture says, when more than 2 people meet, now we have church.
There it is.
I just say it all the time. I sound genius when I start remembering Scripture, but it's so simple and so true, people. And now to your segment, Movie Man.
Yeah.
We know you are into the movies, and what greater way to give us some examples of transformational presence than some movies that are out there that we might be able to get a little bit better idea of what we're talking about.
Exactly. I'm going to go a little old school on us here this morning and talk about some older films that really need to be seen and then re-seen again. And we need to show these kinds of movies to our younger people as well. So here are a few, and I'm going to focus actually on education. I'm an educator. I think educators and teachers are pretty cool folk. So I'm going to talk about some educational transformational presence ideas here. So my first movie, how can you miss this? To Serve with Love. Sidney Poitier. I mean, my word, talk about old school, going back in the day. This is a great old film that needs to be re-seen, and you're laughing over here.
No, because as an African American brother, when you're 7, 8 years old and see a brother in a role like that, it has impacted. Just every time I hear it,
Yeah.
I just had a flash.
That's cool, man. You got this big smile on your face. Here's another one, Stand and Deliver. This one was done in the 1980s with Edward James Olmos. So we're talking about a Hispanic community, an Hispanic communicator, actually, in this case, where he was training these young folks in math and just created these wonderful mathematicians, of folks that nobody else thought these folks could learn. Mr. Holland's Opus, one of the great film roles of Richard Dreyfuss. If you haven't seen Mr. Holland's Opus in a while, go out and check that thing out. It's really great. Morgan Freeman, Lean on Me. Oh, my word.
Yes,
Talk
sir.
about a man carrying a big stick. I mean, Morgan Freeman doesn't get any better than that. The movie Lean on Me is a school principal. Another one, October Sky. Jake Gyllenhaal does a great job there, 1950s emphasis of a teacher who encourages the creativity of a young man who wants to work on rocket ships. Remember the Titans. How can I not talk about education without Denzel Washington? Remember the Titans, a great educational film because a coach is influencing his players. And then one more, I've mentioned Emperor's Club in the past. I want to say it again. Kevin Kline's great role as a great teacher who is generating the next generation. This is what it's all about transforming a place. You got to be there. You got to live this thing. People have to see you there constantly. Students have to be able to go back and look you up on the school campus and say, yeah, one of the influences in my life was you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's I say it all the time about success. It's, it's like a butterfly. If you reach out and try to catch it, it will elude you. But if you go do the work, it will land on your shoulder.
Look at you.
We're going to come back. 10-Point Coalition will be in right at the top of the hour. Transformational Presence is the name of the show. And speaking of transformational presence, this organization has gone into 3 neighborhoods that they said we're going to go in and try to help stop crime. Probably over 32 murders in those 3 different neighborhoods, and in the last 12 months, murder-free in the targeted age group that they said they were going to go stop it, and that is presence in the neighborhood. So we want you to stay tuned and listen. This is Warp and Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site.
You're listening to RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site, Warp and Woof Radio, 10 to 12 every Wednesday morning. And we have been talking about a really important concept here this morning, which is transformational presence. We're talking about being light in the darkness, not becoming like the darkness, but being light in the darkness, and the presence of being there, being in the community, being with the people. This is huge. So today we have a tremendous opportunity to have Pastors Ellis and Harrison with us. We're so glad you're here at the show with us. Thanks so much for being here. Need us to tell us a little bit about yourselves, your families, life, churches, work in Indianapolis, wherever you want to go.
Well, first of all, thanks for having us here. I'm Reverend Charles Ellis, Pastor Charles Ellis, and I I pastor at 25th Street Baptist Church in the near northwest side area of Indianapolis. It is on 25th Street, as the name suggests, right off of 25th and MLK, and I've pastored there for 17 years.
Wow.
And I am married, and I have one daughter, Brianne, and she's 15, ready to take over the world. No one told me that about little girls. She's not a little girl anymore, but I knew when we first had her that I said somebody was supposed. I knew about little boys, but I didn't know about little girls. And I'm here also as I served as executive director of the 10-Point Coalition, and since about 2008.
Great.
And so we've been since that time. Actually, I was part of it as a volunteer, probably in 2006, 2005, and walking the neighborhoods, engaging the neighbors, and short, and we'll talk more about 10-Point Coalition, to really talk to the youth about violence, stopping the violence, stopping shooting one another. My passion for getting involved was that I think one of the great issues of our time is the fact that we have so much violence, and specifically we have violence, urban gun violence, as we call it, a substitute for black-on-black crime, since that term has become so toxic. but we say urban gun violence. And so I got in because I think it's an issue of our time that needs to be addressed. And so I got involved. I was minding my own business. And things were simple until this fellow, Reverend Charles Harrison, and I won't go into how, I think it was kind of serendipity that God, we actually were together in some other community efforts. One of them, which called Ministers on the Move, and we were kind of put together. And I think our total purpose of God putting us together, not only to work in the community, but also to connect us. Because after we got connected, the others just kind of fell off, but we stayed connected. And so he brought me to 10 Point, and man, that's all I'm going to say. Things got complicated after that, but it's been a good ride, and I think God has blessed us. So I'll stop right there. Just a little brief introduction to me. I'm actually born in his hometown. I was born in Jeffersonville, Indiana. Parents both were teachers in Louisville, Kentucky. Moved to Indianapolis, and most of my formative years were in Indy since about third grade. Lived on the south side of the city in the 70s, and then moved to the Butler Tarkington area when I was junior high.
Okay.
And so that's just a little bit about me.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Pastor Ellis. I'm Pastor Charles Harrison. I am from Jeffersonville, Indiana. Grew up there and was a part of the Wesley United Methodist Church, and very active in the church when I was there. I had those kind of parents that they didn't give you a choice as to whether you went to church on Sunday morning. And I went most Sunday mornings with my grandmother because my mother was working with my other brothers and sisters. I ended up attending Jeffersonville High School, and I was very active in sports. And I really thought that's what I was going to end up doing. Very good baseball player, football, basketball, ran track. So I did a little bit of everything.
Wow.
Yeah. And got a call into ministry when I was about 17 years old. It was a transformational experience for me, and I kind of share a little bit about that when we, really talk about 10 Point, because that really impacted my life. I'm currently serving Barnes United Methodist Church, and I've been the pastor there about 23 and a half years now. So that's a very long tenure for a Methodist pastor, to be in a parish that long. I'm also a state police chaplain. And I've been a chaplain now with the state police about 25 years. I work out of District 52.
Okay.
So when I wasn't married, I used to ride a lot with Trooper Beeman at the time. He's now Captain Beeman with the United States Police, and it certainly gave me a different perspective on the work of police officers that changed some views that I had concerning police. So I thought, I did that rode almost every week for about 5 years, and I got to see a lot. In my, current job at Barnes United Methodist Church, being there for 25 years, we have really become a very community-oriented church, and it was a difference from what it was when I arrived there, really 23 and a half years ago. Was a greater outward focus in the United Northwest area. So the church is located just one block from 30th and MLK. It's the oldest church that has been in Unwa. It's been in Unwa 137 years.
Wow.
So it has remained in that neighborhood in different locations, but it has not left the neighborhood. Very prestigious church in that neighborhood, and it's certainly been an honor to serve there. I'm married late in life. I've been married for almost 12 years now. I have four children, two grown children, and have my two youngest is 11 and 9. Me and my wife were foster parents, and when our two youngest, when the rights were terminated, from their mother, me and my wife just couldn't let them go back into the system. By that time, they had won our hearts over. So we adopted Jalen and Jeremiah. So it keeps me young.
Yeah.
I
should think so.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
Yeah, having those little ones all around you.
I know.
I know. Well, something that kind of jumps out at me as I hear both of you talking about this is I'm hearing 17 and I'm hearing 23. And so between the two of you, you've been down there doing your thing on near MLK 25th and 30th for 40 years. I mean, between the two of you, in a long time. So address that particular issue, because we've been talking about presence and being in a place for a while. How important is it to be in a place for a while? That is, for a length of time, like y'all have been down there.
Well, I think it's important. I do. I think part of the success, that we have had is the fact that our churches have been, a part of that neighborhood in the United Northwest area for years. So the church has had a presence. I've had a presence for 24 years. I've gotten a sense of the neighborhood, a feel for it, know a lot of people, and have been very involved in it. So, beyond what people know of what 10 Point does, a lot of the significant work that is going on in these neighborhoods are being done by the churches, and we don't talk a lot about the extended ministries that the churches have, in addressing our target audience. So that has really been key. And I think 10 Point was just kind of birthed out of the other ministries that we were doing in the neighborhood. So it became an extension.
Yeah, I think, there's nothing like consistency. And for the church itself and then the neighborhood. And so to be, kind of there on a post faithfully, and I don't know where 17 years went, but it went fast. I know the community is markedly different. When I came in '99. It's markedly different, and people get to know you, as you said, through the ministries that you do, and that you share with people, and people, they know you and they afford you that respect. They know, and many through some of our ministries I've had direct contact with, and they know me by name. And many don't know me by name, but they know, that's the preacher. They know my car. They know, and that's a double-edged sword sometimes. I don't have, in those big old Methodist churches, they have a whole lot. I have what I call a whole lot of Batman entrances and exits, and I don't have those. I got one. They can kind of camp out for me, but when you're dealing with people, that is what you're dealing with, people, and sometimes broken. And one of the things about ministry, you discover you get used to meeting people and dealing with people and seeing people when they are less than at their best, and but you come to recognize that that's not them. It's not the true picture of them. It's them at a moment, a snapshot, a picture at less than their best. In ministry, we get the opportunity to remind them and that they can come back from whatever it is, and God is building them. And of course, there's hope. So we get the opportunity to do that, and it's not easy work. That's why we're co-laborers with God. And so we just have to be there to be His hands and His feet, and of course, let God through the Holy Spirit do the work.
It sure sounds like a whole bunch of stuff HB and I were talking about already here in the first hour. That's really great. The hands and feet of Jesus, the emphasis on consistency and dependability. But Pastor Ellis, you just mentioned a word that's really powerful and important to the Christian, and that is the word hope. Talk just a minute before we go to break about the issue of hope, and what kind of hope do y'all bring to your church is to the folks on the street and all the people that see you in your car, man. that thing made me chuckle.
Well, yeah, well, we obviously bring the hope that where somebody is, that certainly through God and through Christ, their plight can change, and their plight will change. In fact, one of our themes at 25th Street is transformation itself. You certainly, the 2 Corinthians, fast if anyone be in Christ, they are a new creation, and so it's all about that transformation in Christ. Not enough to come to Christ, and we maintain that if you come to Christ and you have an encounter with Christ, you can't stay the same. He will not leave you the same. You will change. You will begin to look like Him, and for the better. And so our job is to bring you, if we can, and interest you in however we can, and bring you close to Christ. And we do that however we can, whether it's through a food pantry, or it's through a hot meal, or it's through a SAM ministry, a substance abuse ministry, however we can, to get you to make that connection, that love connection, if you will. And so it is all about transformation. I think sometimes we forget. And I admonish our congregation that says, people say, I'm Christ and I'm the same person that I was with, and something's wrong. Because when you come to Christ, He doesn't leave you the same. He doesn't leave you alone. He continues. And, oh, by the way, we're all in the process. We haven't made it there yet, as God is continually fashioning us. And so transformation is a big thing. It's a big thing that we, aim for. Our vision statement is the place where lives are changed. That is our aim. That is our encounter when someone comes, that transformation begins right then, and then it begins an ongoing, a lifelong process. Really.
That's great.
Well, I think for us and at Barnes, and this is part of what I do at 10 Point, I think people out there are frustrated. I think a lot of people don't see their lives getting any better. They don't see their situation or their circumstances really changing or getting any better, and a lot of people who are part of their neighborhood certainly don't feel like people care, and a lot of times they don't feel like we care as the church. So I think there's been an intentional focus on truly being the light of Christ, and sharing God's love, God's compassion, God's caring for the least of God's people, and to offer people an opportunity, to embrace, God's grace and God's mercy and His love, in very meaningful ways, through a lot of different ministries that we offer people, through the church. And I think that's what gives people hope.
Yeah, that's great stuff. We can tell we got a couple preachers up in here. That's a good thing, man. Baptists and Methodists unite. Here we are. We are going to hit a song, and then we're going to come back. You're listening to RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site, Warp and Woof Radio. This is RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio. Man, it is really hard to stop talking in between here. When we get going, we get these questions. The off-air stuff is just as good as on-air. Pastors Ellis and Harrison here from 10 Point Coalition. We're just thrilled that you guys are here. We wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about 10 Point, generally speaking. We've talked about your churches and your lives and so on, but let's talk about the general overview and the history of the 10 Point Coalition. Go ahead and take that away.
Well, 10 Point really got started in 1998 in the United Northwest area by three pastors, Father Walden at Holy Angels Catholic Church, Reverend Clarence Moore at New Era Church, and myself at Barnes United Methodist Church. And it was interesting. We were a part of the Front Porch Alliance, and we had an opportunity to hear two ministers out of Boston talk about the Boston Miracle in dealing with urban gun violence. And I left the meeting just fascinated, after hearing their story, the role the church played in reducing the urban gun violence that was really impacting youth, particularly black males ages 14 to 24. And we had a meeting, I think, 3 days later after we had heard, those two ministers speak. And a lot of the ministers were really concerned and disturbed by Pastor Rivers, who was really critical of the church, and the lack of involvement in the church and really dealing with this social ill that was really impacting our communities. So I was really fascinated by it because what Rivers said really spoke to me because I shared a little bit about my life earlier, but what I didn't share is I had a brother who was killed, at the age of 21 by gun violence in Louisville. And, I was a teenager at the time, and I, wanted to get revenge against those who had killed my brother. But it was the church that saved me, and it was particularly men from my home church that intervened in my life and kept me from going down that path. So as I began to think about my own personal life, I started thinking, if the church played a role in my life and kept me from falling off the cliff, could we not also play a role in the life of young men and young women who are caught out here in the cycle of crime and violence and be the vehicle that can lead them down a different path in life that will help them fulfill their destiny and purpose in God. So we formed in January of 1999 what is known today as the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition with three primary goals. We had three goals. One was to save our children from violence, and that is the street engagement piece that we do. Two was to provide them job opportunities, because you have to have an alternative to people being involved in criminal activity, particularly if they see it as their only means of survival on the street. And three is to help improve their literacy skills. And we had a lot of churches that adopted schools in the area, and they provided mentors for kids to help them in the area of their academics. So this was the church, leaving the four walls and really engaging, the community. And a part of that, we started adopting, streets, so that, Barnes adopted 3 streets. So that was our street that we would, help keep that street clean, get to know the neighbors, start developing, relationships with residents on this street that we really didn't know, because most of the members just kind of drove in and drove out. So that was a way we really got to do that, and we did that as a 10-point church. But Mark, that was really the three primary focuses of 10-Point and kind of the history of it. And I let Pastor Ellis go into some more details about what we do.
Yeah, well, those I guess I would say the bread and butter of what we do is what the direct engagement where we would encounter drug dealers, gangbangers, and really have a conversation with them about coming out of the life of the game as they call it. And as Pastor Harrison's already alluded to, they would say, well, what's the trade-off? Because, I'm going to give up. There's an economic piece to this, right, and I'm going to give this up. This is how I'm supporting my family. This is how I protect myself. And you want me to lay it down. Now, what are you going to do for me? And so there's some very real conversations taking place there on the street. And one of the things that I found out, that I discovered, didn't know, and that is that everybody out there is not out there because they want to be out there. Right. Some of the gentlemen that were out there was because they think they have no options. And so one of the things that we do with that street piece, we enlist men that have been there, done that, often been to jail, or maybe they didn't get caught, but they've been out there, they've been on the street. Many of them thought of as OGs, original gangsters, and they can speak the language. We can speak the language to a certain extent. Now, because I never have had that experience, I can't go as far as they do. I can't. And so we began to see the efficacy of those that have been there, done that, and said, you don't have to walk this whole trail all the way down. You can see from me, I'm an object lesson, and not only that, you can get out. You have options. Not and one of the things about Indianapolis, the good things, I guess, in the area of gangs, we don't have as many hard traditional gangs. There's more of a fluidity in our gangs. We call them cliques, and so they may be fluid. They may fly, go from one to another. And the biggest thing with that is in the more formal gangs, traditional gangs like Gangster Disciples, and somebody has to bless you in. You have to get permission to get out. That's much more complicated and can be more dangerous. We don't have as much of that here, and so for somebody to get out of that life, it's readily available. It's readily available if they want to. And so we began to encounter them, and we began to see the success that we were having of guys saying, hey, I recognize that I've got some other options. And so that we focused on that. Now it's called a faith walk because we go out, we don't have any weapons, we don't have any vests, any bulletproof vests, and we haven't had any trouble. And really, we've made a name in the community because the community knows that we are for them. And our hope is to pull them out. Now, and we walk an interesting line with the police. We are not the police. We don't attempt to be the police. In fact, we work. Sometimes we have public safety walks, kind of as an event where we walk with the police. But our faith patrols are not with the police deliberately because we want to encounter them. We want them to encounter us. We know that there are historical issues with African Americans and the police, and that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is say, listen to us. Let's get out of this life before the police have to come. Because when the police have to come, they're going to do their job. They're going to be police. We're not going to. So the police plays their role, and they have a very clear role to play. And we have our role as community to say, let's put the guns down. Let's get out of this life. Let's get some other options before the police get involved. And so that has been the piece that has been our bread and butter. We've done other things like mentoring and as he said, linking people to jobs, and that's still going on. The job linkage is really getting bigger. But the bread and butter is that direct engagement of people, of residents, community, and the bangers and dealers when we can get to them.
Two things just kind of rolling out of all of what you've just suggested here. The word options, I want to address that. But before we talk about the options that folks have getting out of the gangs, talk a little bit about the issue of when you talk about the police being there. Do they know when your walks are, and do they know when to stay away and kind of keep a distance, as it were, so that you can do your job and be in that community?
Well, the police role with us is probably more so with us pastors than it is our volunteers. We cannot be seen as a part of police, as snitches, as Reverend Ellis has talked about. So in order for us to be able to function and operate, we have to keep that real separation. So most of the time, like this past Sunday when we celebrated, 1 year in Crown Hill without a homicide, when we do those public events, it's more of a community walk, or what we would call a public safety walk, where it's not just police in 10 Point. We have community there. But when we're out the rest of the week, no, we don't let them know when we're going to be out and those kind of things. But they see us. They know we're out there. Yeah, they know we're out there. But we intermingle with that targeted group that is most likely to be involved in the violence. Police tend to see us out there because they see the vest. So, now they know where we kind of meet at, and oftentimes they'll come by and wave at us, so at least they know that we're in the area.
Sure.
And that's, we try to keep it that way because we don't want to make it dangerous for the people who are volunteering for us as they go into these high crime neighborhoods, and particularly down these dark streets where they become a target.
Sure, and you don't want to make it dangerous for the folks that you're meeting,
Yes.
whether they be drug dealers or
Yes,
whoever,
yes.
because you don't want to set them up.
Don't set them
in
up.
that
That's
sense of
true.
things.
That's true.
We don't, but now let me say, and Pastor Harrison, he may look like he look crazy because the nature of what we do, I'm not going to say it isn't dangerous. Just being out there and in that environment, is anything can happen. And one of the things that we have been noted for, not just the faith walks, but also the support we give, and we give support at crime scenes. And really, the way it has worked in the past, now it varies a little bit with varying administrations. But what had happened in the past, if there's a homicide, IMPD or their commanders, or sometimes even the chaplain's office, will call us not to every homicide, but to the ones where they anticipated great angst. So if a crowd was gathering, somebody had been killed, has been killed, a crowd gathering, they got the tape up, they call 10 Point to come. And what we do when we get there, our job is really to do three things. First of all, we calm the people down, and we want to calm the people down so the police can do their job. And so from the moment and the time that we get there, we're simply trying to just lay a calming effect over the situation, and because something traumatic has just happened, and you never know, all kinds of emotions. The body's there, they can see them, they've got all kinds of questions, and a lot of times people will react. They'll try to charge the tape, and so where there's a calming presence. The second thing that we do, we are faith-based and we are ministers, and so comfort. So we're there to comfort. We're to comfort that mom. We often people will ask us, or we'll ask them to pray. When we pray, we comfort. And then the third thing is conscious. From that moment, and where God gives the opportunity, we start talking about no retaliation, especially if we believe it was a gang related. Because sometimes what happens at a crime scene, you have one, and 30, 40, an hour later you got two, because we know who hit us and we're going to hit them. And so that's our function when we get there. We get there and we begin, and we have been very successful in being able to, because even sometimes it's displaced anger. The police are convenient targets, and we're able to maybe talk them and to get them to calm down, or to find somebody to calm other people down and get there. So it's really a ministry, and in the process of that, we begin to promote the message of peace. We also have done that at funerals. That they've had a representative of us up there, and again we talk about the message of peace. We talk about breaking the cycle of violence, and so we've been able to contribute and be effective in more than one venue than just the street, and so that's our purpose. I know sometimes in the community people misunderstand and say, "Oh, 10 Point only shows up after the damage is done," and we do see ourselves as preventative, but people don't understand, if we don't intervene, a lot of times retaliation takes place, and our numbers have been very, very good. That when we have been able to get in between the situation, we have about a 95% rate that no retaliation that takes place, or that it's put off, a long time. It's delayed because sometimes they'll go a long time. But we've had a really good rate when we can get in between and we know what's going on, and our relationships on the street help us know the players, and also the people that we get that work those neighborhoods, that they know them, and they know the people of the street, and so we may know who's beefing with who, and we can get in between and get and find somebody that can call off the madness. Can we? Because our thing is, what can we do to stop the killing? That's our message.
And there's, that kind of brings me to the other part of the question, which has to do with options. You mentioned that you're trying to give folks options. So what are their options? When you talk with somebody who's in a gang and they say to you, well, what's in it for me if I give this up? what is your response? What are the things that are being offered?
Well, there are several things, and most of when we go out on the street, the thing that you hear the most that's frustrating, particularly our returning citizens, is they feel like they have served their time in prison, they have come out, but they still have the mark of Cain on them. Mm-hmm. So they're still literally being punished for the crime that they committed, that they went to prison and served their time, but they're still being punished for that. So jobs is a big piece. And, we have had a lot of businesses that have really stepped up, particularly the last year in our work in Butler, Tarleton, Crown Hill, and the United Northwest area, who have given those ex-offenders, returning citizens, a chance. And that's, what we sell out there is that there are people who are willing to give you a chance, and I have returning citizens ask me all the time, even when we're not with 10 Point, just going into the grocery store or send me out on the street, can you help me get a job? And that's one of the major pieces that we try to offer them, because they know the danger of what they do. They know the danger of it. They know that it's going to lead to one or two places, either them going back to prison or them being killed, and ended up at Crown Hill or some other cemetery in the city. Mm-hmm. So most of them want to get out. Most of their female companions, whether it's a girlfriend or their wife, wants them out. Mm-hmm. And we use that too, as a leverage, to try to convince them, to look at this option that we're offering. I mean, there are other things that people have going on. It could be housing. It could be, issue of not having enough food. And that's where we use all of the resources of all of our 10-point churches and partners to be able to connect people to what it is their need might be, or other community partners in the city. So we try to meet their need, and for most people it's different, but for most of them it's the whole jobs piece. We hear that more than anything. They want to be able to work for themselves, and that's the fallacy out there, that they don't want to work, they want to be out here in a life of crime, and that's really not true. Most of them do want to work. They want to make an honest living. There are some who don't, and we deal with them in a different way, but most of them do. So Mark, that's where we spend a lot of our time, out there in the streets, trying to connect people to resources.
Okay. All right. Well, this is a huge issue, I think, for all of us when we stop to think about what can we do, how can we participate, and when we think about jobs, and obviously the close cousin to that is the issue of housing. Where am I going to live?
That's right.
And how am I going to live? So where and how am I going to live are huge issues, and to see people step up in neighborhoods is really a big deal and a very important issue. Now, some of what we've been seeing on social media is that other communities around the United States have requested the coalition's help. Talk a little bit about that and about what that means for the future.
Well, we have had locally in the city, other neighborhoods requesting our help. We have had cities across the state call us, and we just had a few weeks ago Louisville, Kentucky. Their police department and community leaders come to Indy. We were in Louisville a couple months ago. They will be back in Indy next week to start the training. And this is what we had hoped for. I mean, we really believe that our methodology, the 10-point model, is an effective model of community policing where it calls upon the mobilization of the community and all of its community assets and partners working together for a common cause. One, how do we redirect the lives of our young people and put them on a path of success? That's the goal. How do we put them on a path of success? Our goal is not to incarcerate them. Our goal is to put them on a pathway of success. And then two, as a community, how do we begin to address all of the root causes that will lead a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old down a path of crime? We got to deal with all of those different factors. And thirdly, how do we use people who are assets in our neighborhood who can help us reach this target audience that most people think cannot be reached in ways to begin to speak to them where they are and help them transition, from a life of crime to a life of being a productive citizen. Mm-hmm. And that's what we really preach, when we're out there, on the streets. And that's the model that has really been successful for us because what works in Butler Tarkington is different from what worked in Crown Hill. And what worked in Crown Hill is not the same model that's working in Unwa. We try to identify what the strengths are in these neighborhoods and mobilize those assets so that, the strategy that we use fits that neighborhood, So it's not one strategy that will work in any neighborhood, understanding the strengths and the weaknesses of that neighborhood, and then putting a plan together in partnership with the police, and the business community, and I think I'm believing God. I believe that things have happened that is not only going to make this 10-point model a statewide model, but I'm believing God that it's going to become a national model because it worked in Boston. It's working here in Indianapolis. I would love to see it in all the high crime neighborhoods in Indianapolis because I think it'll make a difference. And I believe we're going to see it across the state and across the nation.
And let me just say, and really to be real honest about it, there's several other across the country. So there's other models that you might hear. You might hear ceasefire. You might hear of cure violence, which does it from a medical viewpoint of view, violence as a public health issue, or safe streets. All of those originated from the 10-point tree. They operate a little differently, and they have but all of it still comes back from the mother model, which was at Boston.
Yes,
and then we were like the first spinoff of that model from Boston, and from what the founder, Reverend Rivers, said is the one that's the most active and probably been the most successful. But I'd just like to chime in and say, I think we serve the role as a catalyst to come into crime-ridden neighborhoods and say, you don't have to accept this. Because people throw their hands up and says, what can we do?
That's right.
It's like, okay, man, another homicide. I mean, okay, and I think, our model shows that you don't have to throw your hands up. You don't have to acquiesce. You don't have to give in to violence. We don't have to. There is something you can do. There's something, and we'll come in alongside and help you do it or train you to do it. That in the neighborhood that can help reduce the violence. We just went through 3 neighborhoods where there was two neighborhoods with no homicide, one neighborhood with no homicides for a year between ages, our target audience of youth 14 to 25 years old. We're not going to promise that. We believe that certainly is a God thing going on, but we think the model will reduce homicides and violence in the neighborhood when we're able to get in there with the proper resources in the right way. And so we serve as that catalyst of preaching peace.
Yeah, because a lot of what we do, what most people don't understand, a typical night out there, Mark, we are dealing with a lot of conflicts, and we're kind of mediating conflicts out there. We're kind of the emergency room on the street, where something simple, an argument between 2 people can lead to someone being injured or killed. And that's the reality out there. So we spend a lot of time dealing with street conflicts and mediating those conflicts, or when we hear that there is a conflict between 2 individuals or a group of individuals that potentially can lead to violence. Because of these relationships, we're able, to try to mediate those very successfully, because we have is relationships. All of this is built on relationships, building these relationships of trust where people on the street trust us. They trust us enough to provide us with the information, and they trust us enough that they will allow us to try to mediate this conflict without anybody getting hurt. And that's really been key when you look at, well, how has these neighborhoods gone that long, without, a homicide? And when you look at the numbers, the number of non-fatal shootings have also declined. So we have less non-fatal shootings. So what's happening on the street? What are the dynamics that are playing out there? And that doesn't get any TV play, but we spend a lot of time doing that, and the things that we hear in the street. And that's where, when we start talking about we're the light of Christ, because they see us as the church. They see us as the church, and we care about them. So they trust us enough to give us that kind of information and allow us sometimes to advocate for them that helps resolve a conflict.
Man, this is good stuff. You all have such a great impact in these communities, and it's really warming and generous to hear all of what you're doing. Honestly, we've got this other great program here coming in a few minutes. I think it's called the 10-Point Coalition.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Something like that. So we want to make sure that we don't run into that time. So just in general, and take this wherever you want to go, in the last couple of minutes, tell us what you would like people to hear. I mean, at the end of the day, what are some of the thoughts that you would like to leave with an audience that maybe needs to know more about you, has a different point of view, or maybe even has heard some things but doesn't know the full story, whatever?
Well, I started off, certainly 10-Point is not the silver bullet to addressing the issue of urban gun violence, and we certainly recognize that there are a lot of groups in this city that are doing great things, and we just want to come alongside and be a help or a blessing when needed, to any neighborhood or any group that needs our assistance. We are working currently right now with a couple other groups in the city, the Concerned OGs at 38th and Sherman, and Parents Against Gangs in the 42nd and Post Road area. So sometimes people think that we think that we're the only group that's doing it and the silver bullet to it. No, there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of good things. This is our lane. This is where God has placed us, and we just try to be faithful to what God has ordained for us to do, where God has placed us. So if God expands our territory, we're going to be obedient to God and certainly serve where God is leading us. But I would like to. That's my part that I would like to leave the audience as president of 10-Point.
Well, I guess I would chime in and say, the one thing, and obviously for any nonprofit, the issue is certainly resources. And, one of the questions we get is, why aren't you all over the city? Why aren't you guys all over? And there's two things that's prohibiting of that. I'll just say this, quite frankly, number one is we haven't been asked to be. Well, let me say this, we haven't been asked by the right people to be. We've had people request, but as far as the administration goes, we haven't been invited. And we don't just barnstorm a neighborhood. And then the second piece is resources. It does take resources to do this work. And what we found as we've been going along, we faded back to the northwest side because that's where our churches are and that's where we're the strongest. And it's been a blessing, because we're able to look at smaller areas and actually measure our work. And in the process of doing that, we 3 neighborhoods 1 year without a homicide. So, the Joseph thing, God is at work, you meant it for bad, but God meant it for good. And so now, and then with a little tweaking of the model and utilizing the residents from the neighborhood, we're ready to take the model again to other neighborhoods, not only in Indianapolis, but to other cities, as well as to, in fact, Louisville will be coming back here
next week.
to begin to walk with us here and begin some preliminary training and to talk to them. So I would just say it says what do they it does take resources for people to be out consistently. That's another key for what we do. Our presence is there. It's always there, 5 nights a week, and I just can't speak dedication of our street outreach workers and volunteers and being there on an ongoing basis. And if you're going to have consistency, you're going to need resources. And right now, and it's not even, we don't have the full-time workers anymore. It's a stipend. But it does help.
See, that's the Baptist in him, and I'm a Methodist
Now,
preacher.
see,
I'm a Methodist preacher.
No.
And I never went to the money first because we don't talk about it like that,
I didn't go to the money first too.
Yeah.
And then I spoke. Now, see, if you'd have talked about the money, then I would have talked about it.
Told you these preachers are something.
Man, look out. Oh, this has been so good. I'm sure that everybody listening to us live and or the podcast afterwards, where we have a greater outreach even than we do in the live studio, is going to be beneficial for folks who are saying, hey, what can we do? What is it that the church can participate in? And Pastors Ellis and Harrison, you've given us a great word here this morning. Thanks ever so much for being with us. Transformational presence.
Amen.
You are listening to RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site, Warp and Woof Radio, every 10 o'clock to noon on Wednesdays. Looking forward to talking with you next week.